My name is Menka Shroff. I lead global marketing for devices and mobility at Google Cloud. And I'm very excited about our panel on transforming work with G Suite and Chrome. So with that, I would love to bring our panelists. Let's have Andrew, Srivatsa, and Michael come join us. We'll probably spend about 40 minutes or so on questions that I think would be valuable for you guys to hear answers to. And then the last 10 minutes or so we'll spend on audience Q&A. So if you have those questions, save them, and then we'll want to address those as well. So why don't we get started with quick intros, maybe talk a little bit about your role and what you cover and how old Whirlpool is. Would love to hear that.
Yeah, you bet. So Andy Lewis, Whirlpool Corporation. We've been around since 1911, so a little over 100 years now and going strong. You recognize some of the iconic brands that we've got, like KitchenAid and Maytag, and of course, obviously Whirlpool. And so I lead a team at Whirlpool called Winning Workplace. And it started with, funny enough, it started with a real estate organization, and we were transforming the way that people were working, essentially using a new building project to try to get people excited and think about collaboration and get folks in the same room and get them talking a little better. And so had a lot of success with that, and then we actually started to tie the IT into the collaboration suite. So if you think about 6 years ago, our collaboration technology was a bag projector that you had to borrow and hope that the bulb wasn't burnt out, right? So we had a lot of things that we had to figure out as far as where the TVs went and how high they were and things like that. And so when we went and decided what to do with Google and our collaboration suite, we tied right into that strategy. So now, based off the success of that and the culture change that we've driven, our team now is our support desk, desk side support, all of the end user services, all of the, obviously the Google suite and the collaboration, both virtual and physical. So.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, guys. I'm Srivatsa Ramaswamy. I'm the Vice President of IT at Sanmina Corporation. Not as old as Whirlpool. We are in the late 30s. I'm the young kid on the block, if you may. With that said, I think Sanmina as a company, we are basically a manufacturer of electronics. So while many of you may not have heard our name, if you've used a server in a data center, most likely we touched it somewhere. We build it for our company, the brand companies, and then we ship it directly to our end customers based on the IP specs they provide to us. Right. My responsibility specifically, I'm responsible for America's business systems. I also have a second responsibility as the Chief Technology Officer for 42Q, which is a cloud-based manufacturing execution systems. So similar to the trend Andrew talked about, one of the key things that Sanmina has done is that we have partnered with Google right from the early days of Google productivity tools coming in the cloud, and that naturally led us into the cloud-first strategy. So we're pretty excited to talk about Chrome and G Suite in the light of that.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Romancic from Middlesex Hospital. Role there is desktop architect, which basically entails development of new solutions and endpoint devices for deployment through our organization. We're also another 100-year-old company that has continuously evolved, and we've prided ourselves on trying to keep up with the market and trends and where technology is going, because in the end, a better technology package for our users and organization allows us to provide better healthcare for our community. Google's been an integral partner in that, originally starting out with G Suite about 7-8 years ago, and migrating off of our previous solution. It's been an incredible transformation and allowing collaboration on the fly regardless of device. And in the past few years, expanding to the Chrome OS side of things has really complemented that investment.
Awesome, great. We always think about cloud-native companies as companies being less than 10 years, but this is fascinating to see 100-plus-year-old companies and 30-plus as well. Great, so we'll talk a little bit about what your world was before Google. So what was the pain point? What were some of the pain points and challenges before Google came into in your corporate environments? I mean, we'll start from you, Michael, since you have the mic as well.
One of the biggest pain points, particularly in healthcare, has been the prescription of your solutions by your vendors and by regulation in your state or governing body. It's really driven a very monolithic structure that had more and more expensive devices, more expensive software, additional encryption, additional antivirus, and it's really, it turned into a complicated, overpriced solution that didn't seem to be, giving way to any options in the market. And, this is where Chrome has really, really succeeded well for us. It's allowed us to rethink how we create our deployments and rethink what a workflow actually looks like. Why do you have hours that go into a $1,500 endpoint when you could have 10 minutes out of a box with a pre-deployed solution that's going to get those knowledge workers up and running immediately?
Great.
So our situation is that we are manufacturers, as I mentioned earlier. So a lot of our factories are powered with Windows desktops, and we have roughly about globally we have 85 factories in 25 different countries. So it's not you can't say in one place you have 15,000, 20,000 equipment and you can manage it. We have to manage in the smaller lot sizes across the globe. And most of them being Windows-powered desktops, and we'll have test scripts and things like that are running locally on each machines. So managing that would pretty much is our environment that we had to deal with. So that's really what actually we'll talk a little bit more as we go through further on Chrome, why it made a difference, huge difference for us.
So for us, we went live with G Suite 4 years ago. And from a tactical standpoint, we were on a version of Lotus Notes. And to be fair, it was a very old version of Lotus Notes. So, terms like email jail and things like that were, very, very prevalent in the environment. And so just basic collaboration was a struggle. Partner that with the fact that we're a very global company, and a lot of times it was just difficult to work across regions, across borders, and collaborate. So that was just really the biggest struggle.
Was there like a tipping point in your organization, whether it was from end users or from executives or something you saw on the actual factory or with nurses or doctors at the hospital that sort of drove some of these changes? Did you have a point in your before Google phase?
Yeah, I spoke to it a little bit in the beginning, but it was definitely the creation of this winning workplace. And it was really, we wanted to focus on how we could give folks the tools and the environment to get their jobs done well. And so what we did actually when we did all these building projects in the beginning, we actually asked folks, what do you need, right? We talked to people and just ask them. And then we did the exact same thing when we talked about our collaboration environment. We actually had kind of a tech fair, and we invited a few different vendors in. And when we did that, it was pretty loud and clear what everybody chose. And so I would say, but the tipping point really was when we started to think about how we wanted to enable the end user. And I think that's kind of a theme on our journey to this point.
Yeah, it's definitely a cultural change.
Thank you. For us, actually, as I mentioned earlier, we decided a cloud-first strategy, so much, much earlier. So it was very natural for us to move into Chrome and G Suite, right? The other big piece, I think, for us that made a difference was around security, right? So when you think about data, I'm sure many of you guys experienced this, where you have your user, your data. In addition to that, you have your customers' data as well. Right? Given that we build for thousands of customers, it's really key for us to make sure that their data is protected well. And I think for us, one of the key things was moving into Chrome as a migration allowed us to keep our data in the cloud-based secure model, so we were able to protect that better. So security was another big thing. The last thing I'll tell you is that when you start to think about Chrome and G Suite, right, the other piece that we saw as to migrate was the need for collaboration within factories right next to each other. So if you think about a factory and people are standing in a line working on their respective stations, right, oftentimes they are doing something that typical structured system doesn't enable them to do, and so they need to have more free-form communication. Traditional applications don't allow you to do that, right? So coupling the G Suite with that, where they could have a monitor where common data shared across the community, those were things that drove adoption of G Suite and Chrome much higher for us.
It's fascinating. It's not just collaboration for your office workers, but it also extends to factory workers. It's sort of everybody is interested in this collaborative nature.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you see so much creativity in the way they think about it. It's really fascinating to see when you power them with tools and the factories start to adopt it by themselves. That makes a whole different world for them.
Interesting.
That is a great transition point because that's really what drives the adoption. That really is what the tipping point is. The involvement of the employees. This isn't something where IT is just delivering the next solution. This is a corporate evolution. This is designing something from the ground up using the input of your most valuable asset, your employees. They're the ones that are creating your products, delivering care, and they know their jobs better than we do. So interface with them, discuss, what's difficult about your job, how can it be easier, what do you really look for in a tool? Not a piece of technology that you're stuck using because you're told to, but how do you transition that into something they can pick up, get something done, and get back to their work? And our first transition into that phase was actually a very small rollout of just test cases throughout the organization. Duplicates, not replacements, and the feedback was incredible. And it was, well, what can we do next? What's the next evolution of this? Can it also do this and this? Well, of course it can. Let's show you how. And sometimes over the phone, try this now, and an app pops up on their bar. And it really became just a very dynamic, fast-paced development that is still going today. Even while I'm at the conference, I've updated a few OUs for deployments for our lab from my phone.
Wow,
this is
remote
something.
working right there.
Yeah, we all get our calls in the morning and hope we can get through them. But yeah, it really is. It's an incredible platform to work on and to really collaborate with.
What was your evaluation criteria at the hospital? Because I know you have like this interesting, very diverse set of use cases and different types of personas that work that are using both G Suite and Chrome. So I'd love to understand what was the evaluation criteria and how you tried to accommodate to all of those.
Initially, it was a large embedded thin client project where we were evaluating multiple vendors, and Chrome really surged ahead in that and trying to meet not just the needs of the users, but the needs of the security team, our support center, and the finance side. It really, we were having trouble finding something that would tick all the boxes. And this was the first platform that really started taking off. Your conventional thin clients might be a comparable price, and you start looking at it in similar functionality, and then you realize that sat unupdated for 6 years at a location. And you realize the exposure of lateral attacks and other down-the-line issues of a device that remains untouched, functional, but potential looming issue as more of them get out there. So it really allowed us to reduce our vulnerability footprint and really increase productivity.
For us, I think, as Mike mentioned earlier, you have to get the users to understand and adopt by themselves. Because given that we are at 85 different factories in 25 different countries, it's really hard for us to say, let me go put an IT project team to deploy everything. So easy to deploy was a big criteria for us, right? I think that's the first foremost. The second one, I think I would say, when we looked at this was around security, right? So security in two forms. One side is what Mike touched upon, but I think I touched upon this earlier. Data governance was a big piece for us. Because it's really important for us is that a lot of times I'd hear from our customers say, we keep getting this data from your factories and it doesn't seem right. Can you have somebody look at it? And historically, we would never have access to the data. We don't know when what was sent, things like that. With a model like this, the data is now stored in a central place. There's either a Google site or something that people put the data, so we have easy access to it. So things like that actually were our criteria for picking that. The last piece I'll add is that Chrome's evolving, right? So that's a big piece of it because where we started as a requirements were very more rudimentary to now various form factors are coming up, various capabilities are coming up. So we have continuously started to expand on usage of Chrome. So that's kind of what I would say we picked as a.
I like hearing that.
So ours was all about collaboration. And actually, just out of curiosity, how many folks are using G Suite and how many are not? Like, can we raise your hands if you're using it right now in a corporation? Okay, so you all get it then. If there's folks in the room that aren't, I'm speaking to you. So, I mean, we felt you just couldn't underestimate the power of having people in the same document at the same time, working together. Something it seems like just second nature to us now, but it was just a game changer. And I remember doing road shows when we were letting people know about the decision and getting them excited. And, we would sneak people out through the audience, and then we'd all hop in and edit a document in front of them, and it would just, blow their minds, right? But and I think they spoke about it in the keynote, just so you don't work serial anymore, you just collaborate and get in and work. That was one of the major things that we looked at and said, we need that. Now, there was a lot of work that I would say our partnership with our corporate security team and our legal teams as we went through this process to understand security, understand retention, all of the, obviously the risks that we thought that we might incur with this. But this was our big jump into the cloud. So it was, we used G Suite to figure out a lot of the things that we now understand and can apply to other clouds.
You turned it was like the switch on the weekend, like all 21,000. Can you talk a little bit about that deployment process and what it entailed?
It was close to it. So we have 38,000 users that are on, and it wasn't exactly, we split it up over a 2-week period because we didn't want to have everybody coexist between systems for a long time. But we did, our biggest deployment was 22,000 users all at once, and the interesting thing is we had folks that were so excited to get on this and get out of email jail and all the things I talked about that from a change management standpoint, I still can't believe we got away with what we got away with. So we went completely greenfield. So we said, hey, we're not going to migrate any email, and we didn't. And if we're not going to migrate any calendars, unless you want to manually go and do that. So, and we obviously gave a lot of support to folks. I'll say one of the things I'm most proud of is that we put a lot of effort into helping our executive admins. Because we knew that they were going to be, feeling the pain a lot more than anybody else. So we catered open hours. We actually catered it. The day before the go live, we all signed cards and sent them chocolates. The whole bit, right?
Keep your admins happy.
Yes, I still have friends because of that. So, but anyway, but the cutover, it was all we had 22,000 in one day with very minimal technology disruption, and it was actually a big party for Whirlpool. So it was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about deployment, what that process entailed? Did you have MVPs or evangelists within the factories as part of the process? So it made it. Can you talk a little bit more about
absolutely. So I think our deployment actually, if you really look at it, we had multiple phases of deployment. In the early days when we deployed Chrome, it was a lot self-driven. So what we did was we incentivized the factories to look at Chrome, and then that incentivization drove them to adopt it. To be honest with you, it worked like magic in many cases because some of the factories have over 50% converted to Chrome. In a world where we live in, if you think about it, most of our equipment has some kind of a test scripts provided by our customers, or we have done some work through corporates, whatever the organization might be. There's a lot of heavy Windows-based legacy apps running. For them to adopt that is pretty significant, right? So I think one of what we learned was that, incentivize them correctly, enable them to scale. The second piece is that after we did that initial phase, what you saw was a very significant adoption, but then you're getting to more complex use cases. So now conversion becomes challenging. So we now have a model where it's a more concerted effort to migrate people out. So it's help them out with deploying. So we're working with Maven Wave as a partner of Google and the Google team to take more complex use cases. And then we also have a methodology where we have plant champions. So what happens is the team works with each factory. The plant manager is a sponsor for the factory, identify the opportunities, and then there's a plant champion who's responsible to make sure that the plant stays on track. And then we have an IT lead that actually joins with that. So by having a concerted effort and having the executive sponsorship, we are realizing that our chances of success are maximized. And we're seeing some really good progress in migrating there. So deployment-wise, that's what I'd say. I think deployment's fairly easy when you get to the simpler use cases. Complex use cases, you just have to think through and find the right approach. But once you have that, I think it works like a clock.
And how long was that process? Was it a 6-month process, or is it a continuous evolving process?
So it's a continuous evolving process, but what we try to do is make each chunks in smaller phases, like, identify a chunk and get them done in the 60-day time frame, because you don't want a project to not have an ending date, because as most of you in IT know, if you don't have a date, it never gets done, right? So that's our challenge. So we always put a date on something, and then we drive to that date.
That's, I think, everybody, not just IT, I would say.
So we had a slightly different deployment method. I mean, it kind of went out as an unofficial project. So as we started deploying out and testing the different use cases, we kind of found champions organically. The people that were really providing feedback, that were really helping development, they got on board. They weren't assigned to the project, but it was integral into getting over the hurdles and understanding the business flow, because not all of us that are trying out the product have been directed to, all right, we're going to create a team, design a scope, and deploy at scale. A lot of this is you guys trying your first dozen or your first 100 and sorting out your use cases, and it's very much an ongoing process. A lot of the use cases that hit the ground running with very little work, we try and even revisit every 6 months. Even if we've not heard any negative feedback or anything, just because the new features might optimize it even more. I mean, they might have gone from a 5-minute get started and functioning to 30 seconds, but what if we take another 10 seconds out of that because of switching to a public session configuration? There always seems to be a way to improve it without really dumping a lot of time down it. It's really while you work, you can roll out hundreds of these devices.
And your end users, in your case, are they, who are they? Are they employees that work in office? Are they nurses? Are they doctors? Like, who are the end users?
Really everybody. We've, particularly through acquisitions over the years, we have everything from, your full EMS and ambulance staff to your outpatient to cancer center and multiple hospitals. And it really, and particularly the doctors that roam between all those systems with multiple medical records and that have privileges but don't necessarily work for us, and trying to provide access to these flexible, not full employees.
Right.
There really wasn't a way to do that effectively without, dumping equipment all over the place and leaving things kind of more exposed. And through Chromebooks and G Suite, we've been able to resolve a lot of these oddball use cases where you might have your on-calls that sit at home for a month and change that used to fall off the domain or have encryption issues, and they leave a Chromebook and it updates via the cloud, and within 15, 20 seconds they could securely remote in with 2-factor and immediately work with patient records. The use cases just go on about all these areas where people have come to us. They heard about it being used in this, and they'd like to try it out in their units.
That's cool.
So it's spread to most of our facilities in some way or shape at this point.
Yeah, you have an organic pull from your employees with different use cases. That's always nice to discover. Any ISVs or other software technology that you had to consider as part of Chrome deployment? Did you have any dependencies?
Oh, absolutely. Healthcare organizations are very tough to get off of their legacy applications. Citrix has been an enormous part of this, and that's actually my primary responsibility. The Chromebook part is I get to see both sides of what gets developed, what gets deployed, and you get to really see how to optimize and improve those experiences. And through Citrix, we've actually been able to deploy a single sign-on package that pulls up your login after you've signed into the book, and your apps are immediately accessible. So you're starting to look at a native PC experience being delivered on a Chromebook in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost. It's really an incredible time to see that capability where it's not for the people that need their 10 or 12 applications. It doesn't matter what platform they're on or what they're used to using. They can start out with a device that half the time I hand off my personal device at meetings. I keep 5 of them on my desk. So I'll go to a meeting, we'll discuss things, and they say, well, hey, what are you doing with that? Well, it's yours now. And, come by for a charger later. And they just keep rolling out. It's really incredible. We'll have our formal deployments, but the onesie twosies are a dozen that might disappear in a week because another group wanted to try them out. It's just the organic growth is incredible.
Awesome. Any challenges if you two want to add around that you encountered as part of the deployment? I know I live in a dream state where I assume there are no challenges, but I'm sure there are things that you could have done differently as part of the deployment. So would love to hear those too.
Yeah, so when you look at our use cases, right, we've got different levels of users, right? The first and foremost is our factory people. So you're producing product, you need to get to the cloud solutions for manufacturing, or you have to access the ERP, right? So that's the first level of users. We just find some challenges that we wish we had looked at earlier on using the ERP systems and the PLM systems, because those are, although it's web browser-based access, they are a heavyweight client. And so there was some complexities that we needed to overcome on that, right? The second category of users that we have are the office workers who are basically doing planning and things like that. And for those users, a lot of them were using heavy legacy applications. And what we actually saw was there's a significant amount of legacy applications driven by our own corporate, right? Which is often you don't tend to take them into consideration up front because you're looking for what they are doing uniquely.
Right.
And then we learned there was a significant amount that corporates ourselves were driving in there. So those were things we looked at, right? And now actually we are getting to more the management and the sales staff. And there, I think the adoption we are promoting is based on acceptable levels. So people who like it, get it, and then they start to use it. So we're kind of promoting that way. But in terms of general, I mean, there was not anything significant, I would say, in rolling Chrome or G Suite out that I would say that was very challenging for us.
Good to hear.
So we had, I'd say, very little tactical things that we could have done better, could have rethought, or maybe weren't ready for. And one of them, for instance, is collaborative inboxes and how do you manage those things. And it wasn't really I don't think it was the Google tools as much as we didn't understand the process. And so we just didn't have a good process for that, and it added some confusion and things. So. But as far as the initial deployment, you opened the door, so I'm going to tell a story. So one of the things that we did, Onyx was our partner, and we had some really creative things that we wanted to do to get people excited, and really it was all about changing hearts and minds for us. And so for our Google Guides, we created these map pins, and they are 2 foot by 3 foot Google Map pins, and it says Google Guide, and we would hang them over people's desks so that when you walked down the hallway, it was very easy to see who the Google Guides were. And we were thrilled with the idea. I thought it was a great idea. There's still actually some up, right? So in the end, it was a good idea. The problem was we printed all of them in Benton Harbor and then shipped them to all of our different locations, which was just a logistical nightmare. And so I would have meetings on a daily, weekly basis with all of our regions, say, hey, how's the communication plan going? Are people signed up? How are the Google Guides? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. When are our map pins going to get here? And so it was just an absolute distraction.
Do not print, just stick to the cloud.
So my advice, just send them the design, let them print local.
Can you talk a little bit about the benefits, as obviously things that you saw and we've heard, but additional benefits that you discovered as part of the process? And I would love for you to share the story you told us about your Italy interaction.
Yeah, so one of the things that when we first went, again, it was our first big swing into the cloud. And so from then on, though, our strategy, we've absolutely got a cloud-first strategy. So we want everything in. And this was, 4 years we went live, and I'd say now we probably have 80% of our transactional information's out in the cloud, okay? So we've made huge leaps and bounds for especially for a manufacturing company. But one of the things we want to do is we want to really roll Chromebooks out to folks, okay? And so I was on a Chromebook. Actually, I started using a Chromebook before we went live. So I've been on a Chromebook solely for 5 years now almost. And during the project deployment, I was working on a Chromebook, and of course everything was in Drive, and we're trying all of that out. And I was traveling to our Italy office, and in a beautiful hotel, sitting in the morning, somebody swiped my bag from under me. And my Chromebook was in there, my phone, my, gosh, what else? A nice camera, my passport. So everything was gone. And the easiest part about it was I just walked back into the office and grabbed another Chromebook and logged in, and everything was there, right? I mean, the passport was a whole nother matter. But I mean, the neat part of that story, I've easily gotten the worth of that Chromebook out of this story because I get to use it all the time. But no data was lost, right? I mean, we're in the throes of about to go live, and I owned all of the change management plan. And if it would have been local, it would have been on my laptop, my copies of it, and it would have been gone. And with this, I mean, there was just nothing. We just grabbed another Chromebook and went, so.
Awesome.
I was just going to say, is that why you were looking different yesterday? No, I'm kidding. But I think the benefits of Chrome and G Suite in general, as Andy mentioned, there's data governance and central place that you have data. I think the more simpler immediate needs you'll also see are around the simplicity, reliability, and the speed, right? How quickly you can get on it. I think earlier Mike touched upon this, where you see immense amount of creativity that you see from people when you give them something and do it. One of the, about 5-6 years ago, at that point I was actually in manufacturing operations, and one of the eye-opening experience I had was our factory had a quarterly business review with one of our customer, right? And I happened to join that because I've heard from a couple of people in my team that some of our factories have done some interesting sites for our customers and are sharing data and everything, right? So I joined that call as a part of that. And what I saw was our executives are communicating with the customer on the quarterly review, and you have a Google Sheet. In those days, it was not called G Suite, it was called Google Sheets, right? So you got the sheets sitting in the front, everybody's looking at it, and the customers are asking questions about, okay, what does this mean, where we are, about the progress for the quarter and everything. And then you can see the customers actually focused their mouse on a different part of the application. So you can see the questions happening on one part and they're reviewing. What you're really able to see is through the conversation, you know what's going to happen next because they're migrating. And what that's good for is that when you're in a situation where you're actually preparing for what the next question is going to be, quarterly reviews are generally, ad hoc and questions come up and you want to be well thought through. So it gave you the perspective of how the customers are navigating through the sheet. And the factories were utilizing that knowingly. That was the fascinating part, right? I observed it, and then I asked the question, and they go, that's very good for us, because we know that's where the customer is going to go next, so we have the right person in there, and they are preparing, so when the question comes, we can answer. So it was very interesting use cases, things like that we saw from a benefits point of view. So.
Yeah, so much of collaboration is not just working on a particular doc, and this is what I'm hearing from some of you as well, is getting to that insight, getting to that predictability a little faster than what you could have with the traditional model. That's sort of like the hidden gem with collaboration.
Exactly. I think impromptu is good, but when you're dealing with complex business issues, you want to be thought through. You want to be meticulous with detail. And so as much early notice you can get, that much more prepared you are for the conversation.
Right.
This is, in those cases, even matter of minutes help you because a person, when they start the conversation and then the conversation goes in a different track, it's not the best of the situation. So by looking at this, they can compose themselves, they can be prepared to answer. So things like that, we talk so much about customer insights and everything using CRM tools and everything. This is a very, very simple use case that I learned from the factories that they're doing.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about the benefits that you saw at your organization. Would also love to hear if there were any metrics that you measured as part of this process that would also be helpful.
Yeah, so the numbers as we got into some of the original use cases were actually difficult to bring to management because they were laughably at a scale that they weren't used to. Some of the initial places where you're looking at, let's say, medical carts, where you have a $2,500 computer, $500 cart, the lock, the time to load it. You have several $1,000s into something that takes up space, difficult to update and maintain, and it's an impediment in working with your patients. You swap that out with a $200 device, and you're trying to convince management it's actually easier to use, it's faster, and allows more patient engagement, and they're wrapping their mind around it sometimes is a bit difficult. Yeah. And you're looking at 12 to 15 to 1 cost reduction ratios on something people prefer to use and is more secure and easier to maintain and deploy. It was really flipping people on their heads when they were first, discovering that this actually could happen, and they realized, no, we didn't just try one or two. We actually rolled out 40 of them last week, and it was an incredible turnaround when we saw those use cases really hit the ground running, particularly when you came into your kiosk and your public session setups. You're looking at a device that inherently has no data on it. It's a brick without an interactive user. It's not assigned to a person. It provides necessary immediate data on a public session and can elevate very easily by whoever's sitting in front of it. So we're looking at banks of devices that you can deploy, not having to go back and charge. These devices lasting 7, 8, 9 hours easily during a full workday. Mm-hmm. And if they're doing that double, they drop it off at the charging station, they grab another one. It really allowed them to unlock a lot of their day that they spent anchored literally to 150, 200-pound cart. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot going on that really keeps changing that dynamic in all of our locations.
Any measurements you want to talk about, things you measure from an IT point of view that would be useful?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing is, I think, from our point of view, for our factories, the total cost of ownership for each one of those workstation was cut at least by half.
Wow.
So that was pretty significant. We're a low-margin business, and so in our model, every dollar counts. And so I think that was pretty significant for us from that point of view.
Does that budget go back to IT?
So actually, it stays with the factory.
Well, that should make the factory manager happy.
It makes them very happy, right? I think that's why I mentioned earlier, when we did the first Chrome deployment, didn't realize how it got adopted. Some of the factories went all the way up to converting half their factories directly to Chrome. Wow. Right? And part of the reason is because the factory manager realized the benefit they can get to their P&L. Right. That's pretty significant, right? And think about it, that just gives you the first stepping stone. Then we can go in there and gain the benefits of collaboration, security, and all those things that are soft benefits from one point of view. They're hard if you really look in the numbers, but everybody understands security, data needs to be in one place.
Right.
Imagine if my IP is out there with somebody who stole a laptop, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that are definitely significant value prop for us.
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about the measurements and the KPIs that we use, and I'll be real honest, I don't know the last time we looked. We've had dashboards that we've built. We look back and forth and try and understand the usage. Really, the usage and the KPIs that I would say that we're actively measuring is we're actively removing other tools from the environment. So specifically think about the collaboration suite that we work on. We don't have any of the other tools, or we're getting rid of them very actively and taking them off of folks' laptops. We don't install them by default. It's by exception. And so for us, I mean, I think that's a huge KPI because now everybody's on the one platform now. There's still some folks that we have to help with challenges and things like that, but I think that's a big one. The other for us that we look at again, culture is a big deal, is the use of Google Meet and Hangouts and video conferencing. And when we launched Hangouts, it was January 2nd, 2015, and we didn't tell anybody, right? Because we thought that was the best change management. If you just let people think they're getting away with something, they're going to. And so...
You're being serious about this.
Oh, I'm dead serious, yeah. We didn't tell anybody. We just turned it on, and it just hockey sticked, right? And so, and now we've got, 700 Chromebox for meeting devices. We just did a whole new office in Europe, and every room has a device in it. So, I mean, all of our conferences, I mean, it's not all, but I'd say for me, it's very odd to actually have a phone call anymore, just because you can get face-to-face. And so, again, we're not measuring that per se, but just the fact that that's so ingrained in our culture now is pretty amazing.
Yeah, the phone call thing is always surprising when I get calls. Even from my husband, I'm like, he's calling me. Why don't we get people to line up if they have any questions? I'll ask one question, then we'll make sure that we address your questions as well. So would love to hear that. Would love for you to summarize some of your takeaways, maybe your top 3 takeaways for the audience as you think about both G Suite and Chrome Enterprise and how to, some of the things that you'd want to share.
Sure. I think I'd start, the first takeaway I'd start you with simply is the security piece of it, right? So everybody understands the basic security, but I think what Chrome allows you to do, if you're a company like us, you just not have to protect your own data, you also have to protect your customers' data. So that was pretty significant for us. That's definitely the first one. The second takeaway I'd say is the whole, incentivize people to do things by themselves model, right? With the simplicity of Chrome and the speed that you can deploy, so all you need is a vehicle for them to do things and try things out and be successful and feel proud about it. So creating some form of an incentivization model or a gamification model that allows them to compare themselves and things like that, those play a pretty significant role on that. Lastly, I know many of companies in IT have spent a lot of time trying to develop data governance and things like that. We often tend to focus on the core information that's in structured systems there. I think the data governance when it comes to unstructured data with kind of a cloud-first strategy through G Suite and Chrome, I think takes us a long way. So those are things that you should look at and see how you can significantly eliminate the overhead you incur because of legacy systems and local solutions where you can see a pretty significant value prop.
Yeah, I mean, this really is a junction point in technology. It's something that's kind of allowed us to reevaluate, not just we're going to use a newer version of an operating system or we're going to stick more hardware on something. Like, this is a scratch start with a platform that is built for the modern age. This is built security first. It's not a layer on top of an OS, and it's how we're doing business. The data is not on the device. Everything's accessible from any platform, whatever form factor. This is really what all of this industry is about right now, and this is the tool to actually get us there. This is the platform that we're going to do it on, and it's something that we really should be excited about. This is a whole new way that we get to do our jobs. We're not just stuck revving up, pushing updates, replacing existing systems. We're starting from scratch, and we're doing it organically. And it's an incredible time to be working on this.
Yeah, I think, so I'm going to skip your 3. I'm going to tell a quick story because it was pretty impactful for our team. When we rolled this out, one of the things that we did a couple of years ago is we went out to all of our manufacturing plants, visited the plants and talked to the folks there just to let them know, hey, here's what you can do with the tools. It was kind of an awareness campaign, got folks excited. And one of the plant managers pulled me aside later in the night, and we were talking, and he says, let me tell you a story. I have a lady that reports to me, and she ended up one morning, I was driving into work, and they called me and said, don't come in, go to the hospital. She's in the hospital. She went in, and she had passed out, and so they took and checked her out, thought everything was okay. Well, she called later that day, and they said, well, we're just going to run some tests later that day, and come to find out she had bone marrow cancer. Nobody knew about it. And she ended up having to go on site and stay in residency and go through the entire thing. And she didn't have a big support network other than at work. And so he said what they did was they actually took shifts of going to Nashville, which was a couple hours away, and staying with her in residency. And they did that, and they could use the tools. And they didn't have to have people take personal time off. They didn't do anything, but they could absolutely support her in this whole journey, right? And he said, if you guys think you're not making a difference here, you're making a difference, because we absolutely could not have done this, without this type of tool and culture change. So it's a pretty powerful story. So it sums a lot of it up.
It ties back to employee engagement, right? It's ultimately driving employee engagement, because all of these tools are supporting them in ways that's sort of hard to measure, but so critical.